adding and subtracting decimals. As we're starting this portion of the unit where we are doing decimal operations, it helps to think of the numbers in terms of money. So instead of thinking of 6.2, think of it as $6.20. That helps to keep your answers more accurate and reasonable because we care about money. The main idea is to line up the decimals. I wrote this big for a big reason because that is the whole main idea of this lesson. Anytime you are adding or subtracting decimals, you need to line up the decimals. So like I said, let's think of it in terms of money. If I had $4 and I'm going to add $1.50 to that, you know that is not equal to $1.54. See how I stacked it without lining up the decimals, and I added 4 plus 0 is 4, and then brought down the 5 and the 1. That doesn't make sense. That's why you have to line up the decimals. However, over here, I lined them up. I added 2 zeros behind the 4, and those are placeholders. You don't have to put those there, but it does help to keep things lined up. And if you have poor handwriting, you're going to take your time, slow down to make sure that you have even columns, because otherwise you're going to get the wrong answer. So when you do add that up by lining the decimals, you get what you knew what the answer was to start with, $5.50. So let's take this problem. 9.1 minus 3.245. So what do? We line up the decimals. We put the the first number on top. 9.1. I'm subtracting, and I'm going to line my decimal up and then fill in the numbers around it. So I have 9.1 minus 3.245, and like I said earlier, it does help to put placeholders in there. And now we're just going to subtract. 0 minus 5. I can't do that, so I have to come over here, and I'm going to have to borrow, but I can't borrow from there, so I go next door again. Okay. So now, 10 minus 5 is 5. 9 minus 4 is 5. 0 minus 2, can't do that. Got to come over here and borrow. 10 minus 2 is 8. 8 minus 3 is 5. Now, if you're like me, all of that borrowing kind of stresses me out. I second guess myself, and I wonder, is that supposed to be a 9 or a 10? And I get confused. So what I actually do in my head is I count back. I had the 45 here, and I'm wanting to get that up to 100. Well, I know I need 5 to get that to 50, and another 50 to get that to 100. See how that's a little bit easier than all of that borrowing, especially when I'm having to borrow on 4 different digits. That can cause some simple, silly errors, so that's the way that I normally choose to do that. Okay, here we go. 32.6 minus a negative 15.86. You're going to have to put your integer glasses on. You can't just forget those rules that we learned a few weeks ago. Put those into practice here. So when I'm subtracting, we learned that subtracting an integer is the same thing as adding its opposite. So we call that keep, change, change. So I'm going to keep 32.6. I'm going to change subtraction to adding, and I'm going to change the second number to its opposite. So now it is 32.6 plus a positive 15.86, which is much easier on my brain than subtracting a negative. So let's stack those numbers up and add them. Okay, I have them lined up. Now I'm going to put my 0 in as a placeholder and add the columns. 6 plus 8 is 14. Carry the 1. 1 and 2 is 3. 3 and 5 is 8. 3 and 1 is 4. So my answer is 48.46. Try this one on your own, pause the video, and then restart it when you're ready to see what I did. Okay, when I look at this, I have to think about order of operations. I have subtracting and adding. They're the same steps, so I go left to right. So I started with 5.1 minus 10. Thinking in integer world, I'm going to keep, change. So I kept 5.9, changed subtraction to addition, and positive 10 to a negative 10. Now it's an adding problem. When I'm adding, I have to see do they have the same sign or the different signs. These are different, positive and negative, therefore I take the difference between them. 10 minus 5.9 is 4.1, and with the sign more, I had more negatives than positives, so it's a negative 4.1. A lot went on right there. So stop, reevaluate it, make sure that makes sense. I have about 6, and I'm subtracting 10. So I'm going into the negatives about 4. See how that, is rational thinking? I have about 6, I subtract 10, I'm going about 4 into the negatives. Now I'm going to do negative 4.1 plus 2.84. Addition rules, they have different signs, so I take the difference between those two. So I subtracted 4.1 and 2.84, and next to my 0, subtracted it, got 1.26. Had the sign war, the negatives win, so my answer is a negative 1.26.